Afternoon and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Today's morning session, the GS paper 3 has been conducted by the UPSC civil services exams. Now let's have a look at the different questions which have been asked from different subjects, starting with the subject of economy and agriculture. And once I finish, followed by me, Mukesh sir will be taking up the discussion, followed by Mukesh sir, Chetan sir, and finally Himabindu ma'am will be taking up all the 20 questions from this particular paper. Let's start. Question number 1. What do you mean by digital rupee? In this context, explain the working and progress of India's central bank's digital currency. And the last couple of years, there has been a lot of discussion regarding the concept of digital rupee. In fact, last year in the prelims examination as well, there was a question on the idea of a central bank digital currency. Now, question is, what do you mean by digital rupee? Start with an intro. The digital rupee basically represents the digital version of the fiat currency that is used in India, that is the rupees. The basic idea of digital rupee is right now the Reserve Bank of India prints and distributes currency notes. Although the currency notes are distributed by RBI, the currency coins are minted by Government of India. Distribution is done by RBI. So printing by RBI, the distribution by RBI, minting by Government of India. There is always a concern associated with this idea of a currency notes that there is a lot of wear and tear. That is one concern. In addition to this, there is also concern that there is a practice of people holding on to lot of cash and a lot of transactions being conducted by cash. At the same point of time, the government of India wants to promote the idea of cashless economy. Cashless economy. Now, when you consider all of these particular factors, the Reserve Bank of India pushing the idea of a digital rupee will become very clear to you. Reserve Bank of India has introduced two forms of digital rupee, and again, the basic idea of digital rupee is simple. Instead of issuing the currencies in physical form, that is the currency notes that you might be having, currency coins you might be having, instead of having a physical currency, they'll be giving you the digital currencies. And how do you ensure, right, you're using the digital currency? How do you ensure access to the digital currency? Basic idea is you have a bank account, and with this particular bank account, you also need to have a CBDC wallet, that is a rupee digital rupee wallet, and you can keep on transferring the funds from your account into this particular CBDC wallet, right? So what do you mean by digital rupee? Define what is the concept of a digital rupee. In this context, explain the working and progress of India's central bank digital currency. Start with the definition of digital currency, followed by what are the reasons behind introduction of digital currency, that is CBDC. In fact, there are many countries around the world which have already introduced the digital rupee, by the way. Many countries around the world. And very recently, China's CBDC made a lot of noise, lot of news because of certain factor, that is interest. China's CBDC has become the first in the world to basically offer interest rates, right? Whereas other CBDCs are not offering that, China's CBDCs offers that, right? So explain the working and the progress of India's central bank digital currency. So the CBDCs essentially are of two types. One type of a CBDC is used for retail transactions, and the other type of CBDC is essentially used for wholesale transaction purposes. One is for retail and the second one is for right wholesale. Another very important point you'll have to mention in terms of working of the CBDCs, basically these are digital currencies, and you can draw a chart as well. That is from the bank account, right, to the wallet. From the wallet, right, the transfers can be done into another wallet, or you can receive the funds into your wallet, right? And these particular transactions can be done from person to, right, merchant, merchant to, right, a trader, that is in the wholesale market as well as in the retail market. And what has been the progress, right? Second part of the question is what has been the progress, right? The progress in terms of CBDCs in case of India has not been up to the expected level. Up to the expected level in the sense we expected adoption of CBDCs to increase at a very faster pace. Despite that, Reserve Bank of India stuck to the idea of promotion of CBDC. Now, the reason why the adoption has not been very fast is because it is competing with UPI. Very simple. The adoption has not been up to the expected level because it is competing with Unified Payments Interface. Because you want to transfer CBDCs. Let's say you go to a shop, you want to transfer the CBDC, you want to make a payment, but now you already have the UPI. You feel UPI is much more easier. Although the CBDC can also be transferred using a wallet, right? That is using a QR code, you can transfer it. But generally, because we are accustomed to the idea of a UPI, which we have been using for multiple years now, adoption, right, has not been up to the expected level. But having said so, you can also mention the current affairs points. Current affairs, right? In terms of conclusion, you can also say that the CBDC is being promoted by the government of India, right? In order to improve the adoption, it is being promoted by the government of India even under public distribution system. That is in many of the right union territories as well as in the state of Gujarat. We have implemented projects wherein the food security that is basically provided in the form of food subsidies for providing the food subsidies and ensuring that there is no leakages, there is no deviation of the food grains. To ensure that the right beneficiaries are getting access to the food grains, right now we are promoting usage of central bank digital currencies. Done? Right. So these are certain very important points. Now, before I go forward, please understand is the questions asked in the subject of Indian economy compared to earlier years, are they difficult or they easy? My feeling is basically that compared to earlier years where a lot of ambiguous questions were asked by the UPSC examination compared to earlier years, this year the questions have been bit easier. At the same point of time, I will also accept the argument that it's a challenge to write a very effective answer on these kind of questions within 150 words. I hope you understand. It's a challenge to write within 150 words because you have so much of information. Done. Now, before I go forward, for those who are preparing for the civil services exams 2027, 2028, we have introduced a new program for you, Advanced Mains Program. Because when you look at the prelim stage as well as the main stage, the toughest part for you is the mains. And I've been telling you this multiple times, even in the CNA, in my classroom programs, etc. It is easier to appear for prelims when you compare that with the mains exams because you have to write. You have to develop those skills to write a very effective answer within 150 words and 250 words. To provide that kind of a, right, let's say, training to you, to ensure that you are UPSC ready, we are starting Advanced Mains Program, AMP. The AMP is going to start on 2nd September and will end on 10th January. We will have total of 240 hours of classes under Advanced Mains Program. We will have analysis on PYQ led themes based answer writing. We will also have a discussion on what kind of questions can be asked, probable kind of a questions, as well as answer writing practice. Weekly 5 questions. We will provide it to you. You will have to write the answer and we will give you the feedback as well. And this loop is very important because a lot of you write the answers, but because you don't know what is the quality of your answer, that will be one of the biggest problems when you basically compete with thousands of the aspirants in the mains examination. So you need to write, you need to work, you need to simply improve the quality of your answers so that you'll be able to score very high number of marks in the mains examination. GS wise, full length test will also be provided and handouts will also be provided for every class. The link for joining this particular program is given in the description box. Do check out the details. Now, let me move on to the question number 2. Examine the view that financial inclusion is an integral part of social and economic inclusion in a country like India. Also, throw light on the usefulness of RBI's Financial Inclusion Index. Right? Last year also there was a question on Financial Inclusion Index, but in the prelims examination. But this year, the question has shifted to the mains. And I hope you understand. There is a particular change in the trend that if you can observe, you will realize it. That is, you take last 5 years question papers. There is no question on targeting the banking sector or even the Reserve Bank of India. In the mains examination I'm talking about, there is no question directly targeting RBI's role either in the context of current affairs or in the context of, let's say, the static portion. But this year, you have question on CBDC, you have question on the RBI's role in promoting financial inclusion, which in turn is connected to inclusive growth. Now, what is the Financial Inclusion Index? This is a new index which has been introduced by Reserve Bank of India. Under this particular financial inclusion index, right, basically there is a scoring methodology. There are various parameters. The financial inclusion index basically comprises of three parameters: access, usage, and quality. And based on these particular three parameters, weightage is also given. And again, there are sub parameters, indicators within this. Based on that, what is the score in terms of financial inclusion is provided. Right? How do you write an intro to these kind of questions? Very often I tell the students or the learners, try to use something from the current affairs. For example, if you have read about financial inclusion, you can basically mention the current affairs point that the FI index score, according to the latest report published by the Reserve Bank of India, has increased to 67. You can start with that introduction. So, examine the view that financial inclusion is an integral part of social and economic inclusion. Why is this an integral part? The reason is very simple. You want to promote inclusive growth. At the end of the day, the target is inclusive growth, right? In order to achieve the inclusive growth, you need to ensure that the population, especially the population which requires assistance from the government, that population is covered within the banking sector. Because when you look at the initiatives of government of India, you will come across one program called as direct benefit transfer, DBT, direct benefit transfer. And the direct benefit transfer is implemented using Jam Trinity, Janadhan, Aadhar, Mobile. Correct? Janadhan, Aadhar, Mobile. Now, when you look at one of the pillars, that is Jandhan, basically it has been implemented by the government of India. It has completed over a decade, by the way. It has been implemented, and we have covered more than 30 crore people within women beneficiaries only, more than 30 crore we have covered under the concept of Janadhan accounts itself. We have covered under the Jandhan, right, Yojana itself. And what is the use of this? The government will be using this kind of, let's say, accessibility in the sense government can be right now be able to identify the right beneficiary and ensure that the beneficiaries are getting access to the benefits. But if all of this has to be done, there is a need for the government, and coming to the point now, there is a need for the government as well as the regulatory bodies to ensure that the banking accessibility points are reaching the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries, that is the bank account holders, right, are getting quality services. Right? The bank account holders are able to use these particular accounts. For example, what if you have a bank account, but the bank is 10 kilometers away? Now you want to get the access to the benefits. You want to withdraw the benefits which are lying into your bank, which are lying in your bank account. But because it is very far, either you will have to forego 1 days of wage work, go there and withdraw the money. Or else the money is there, but you don't know how to get access to that. Right? So digital banking services, banking touch points, ATMs, bank branches, etc. All of these are the very important components of the financial inclusion index. So the idea is very simple. You want to, right, include them in terms of growth as well as development. That is, social inclusion and economic inclusion will lead to what? Development. That is growth and development. And growth and development is going to contribute to inclusive growth. So in that particular instance, what is the role of, right, this particular index? Right? So you'll have to use these particular parameters and simply say, right? Because the government of India wants to implement the policies. You can quote multiple policies, by the way. For example, you can quote, right, the Awas Yojana. You can quote NFSA. You can quote the examples of, right, let's say, providing, right, social security benefits, providing LPG subsidies, etc. So all of these are part of social inclusion as well as economic inclusion. But in order to achieve that, the objectives of social inclusion and economic inclusion are met. It is important to first measure what is the level of inclusion. And if the inclusion levels are not sufficient, in certain regions, yes, there will be a problem. So the inclusion measurement will help you what are the areas you need to work upon. That is basically the discussion that you're supposed to provide here. Done? So this is question number 2. Question number 3. And by the way, before I go forward, I'm more interested in knowing what are your viewpoints regarding the question paper or the kind of questions under GS paper 3. Do let me know in the comment section, right? Was it easier for you? Was it very difficult for you? Were the notes that we have provided in the Conquer mains or in the classroom, etc., were they useful for you? I'm interested in knowing that. Do let me know in the comment section. Question number 3. Describe the various technology missions initiated in India's agriculture and examine their role in food security. In fact, there are two questions which have been asked this year. One is on, and both are, I felt, both are very much closely related. Closely related. One is on technology missions. Of course, yes, slightly atypical question. Atypical in the sense you are expected to know different technology missions which have been implemented post independence. Slightly difficult. But if you have read the notes, right, certain technology missions are easier for you to write. For example, in a stretch, if you stretch it, right, let's say the National Food Security Mission or SMAM, this was in fact there in the newspaper very recently. Why? It was there in the newspaper because of, right, let's say, the promotion of drones within the agriculture sector, etc. Right? In fact, you can also take the, right, let's say, the earlier missions which are associated with, right, a promotion of oil seeds in India, promotion of adoption of technology in marketing of agriculture products, etc., etc. Anyways, describe the various technology missions initiated in India's agriculture and examine their role in food security. Right? So, what are the important points you're expected to mention? Of course, you're expected to mention certain technology missions along with, let's say, one or two statements associated with each of them. But what is this role of technology missions? Please understand the government of India post independence. What has been the situation? In fact, I told you this earlier. There is one more question associated with this only. Associated, not the same, by the way. There was a situation where we faced food scarcity in India. We have faced a food scarcity. But from the area of food scarcity, today we have, right, basically a food surplus situation. That is, if India imposes certain restriction on the exports of certain agriculture commodities, then the international market, there will be spike in the prices. That is the level of influence that India's agriculture sector has in the global market. So, no doubt, there have been multiple reforms which have been undertaken. One such reform is associated with promotion of technology missions. The government of India has launched horticulture technology mission. The government of India has launched, right, the missions associated with mechanization in the agriculture sector. Right, there is a mission associated with the textile sector as well. Right, there is a recent mission on agriculture technology as well, adoption of agriculture, that is that is very famously known as agri stack, etc. And so the multiple types of technology missions have been implemented. These have been implemented in order to ensure that sufficient focus as well as promotion of these areas within the agriculture sector are done. There is a need to focus on individual areas within the agriculture. For example, there is a need to focus on technology, promotion of textiles. So there is a textile technology mission. And what is the importance of that? India is a textile, one of the largest producers of cotton in the world, by the way. India is one of the largest producers of cotton. So there is a huge demand for cotton related products, not only in the domestic market, but also in the international market. So in that particular context, multiple types of technology missions have been launched. You'll have to mention 3 to 4 technology missions, importance of that, and basically within 150 words, you can write the answer for this. Done? Okay, question number 4 now. Explain the factors responsible for inefficiency of agriculture produce marketing. How e-commerce helps in reducing inefficiency of agri-produce marketing. Explain. Difficult question in the sense that you're supposed to write the complete answer within 150 minutes. I'm sorry, within 150 words. Within 150 words. Let's start. Explain the factors responsible for inefficiency of agriculture produce marketing. There is sufficient, inefficient, or let's say insufficient warehousing in India. That is a problem. Sufficient warehousing is not available. Sufficient, right? Let's say the transportation is not available. And when I said transportation here, I'm not simply talking about, let's say, machineries. I'm talking about, let's say, the freezer vehicles, reefer vehicles, right, which are fitted with the refrigeration units, etc., etc. There is also a lot of fragmentation in India. Lot of fragmentation in agriculture sector, right? There is the problem of connectivity. There is a problem of connectivity as well, right? What do you mean by connectivity? There are large areas within India where we do not have proper methods of transportation. As a result of this, right, cultivation of agriculture products are done, but their exports, or let's say their introduction to the market, is a difficult situation. It is not possible. So these are some of the issues which can be quoted as factors responsible for inefficiency of agriculture produce marketing. How e-commerce will help in reducing inefficiency of agriculture produce marketing. You can quote the example of, right, the platform that has been implemented by the government of India, right? I'm pretty sure all of you heard of ENAM, Electronic National Agriculture Marketing, right? What is the importance of ENAM here? Before introduction of ENAM, we had APMC mandis. And to be very precise here, it's not we still have APMC mandis. ENAM essentially is the connectivity of all of these APMC mandis. More than 1,000 APMC mandis have been connected together over the platform of ENAM. What is the benefit? Benefit is very simple. The crops now are introduced on this particular platform for, right, auctioning purposes. The farmers don't have to carry the crops into different places. Same mandi, they can list their crops. And the buyers from different regions can get access to these particular crops and basically start bidding. This will help essentially the increase the revenue or the incomes that are generated. And compared to earlier situation under the ENAM, there is no requirement of multiple licensing regime. You need to have single license to operate throughout all the APMC mandis which are on the ENAM platform. Right? So these are some of the advantages of having introduced the e-commerce in the agriculture marketing. E-commerce within the agriculture marketing. In fact, you could have added couple of more pointers as well in the conclusion that the government has not only just promoted this model of electronic marketing within the agriculture, it has also implemented multiple other reforms to ensure marketing is done. For example, right, one district to one product, or for that matter, right, let's say the initiative, right, initiative where lot of these particular crops which are cultivated in northeastern, right, let's say states, are airlifted and they are introduced into the other part of India, right? That is one of the initiatives under Udan initiative as well. So multiple reforms have been undertaken by the government in order to ensure agriculture marketing is done in an efficient manner. Okay, question number 11 now. Question number 11. Explain the key challenges for India's energy security. What measures do you suggest for ensuring energy security along with economic growth and sustainability? The key word is economic growth as well as sustainability. Okay. Explain the key challenges. What are the key challenges of ensuring energy security in India? No doubt, India's energy production or installed capacity within the agriculture sector, it has increased, no doubts. But at the same point of time, even the demand for electricity has increased. So there are a lot of problems which are associated with this particular segment. What are the problems? One, we are heavily import dependent. We are heavily import dependent. What do I mean by import dependent here? You take for example, right, let's say solar. We are import dependent on cells. We are import dependent on, right, ingots, wafers, etc. Right, or for that matter, nuclear energy. We are import dependent on nuclear material, nuclear plants, etc. Right, or for that matter, coal, which accounts for a substantial amount of installed capacity as well as the production. That is basically we are import dependent on coal. So import dependence is very, very high. And whenever you are import dependent, I hope you understand, you can connect it to current affairs. There will be a lot of volatilities. There will be a lot of volatilities in the global market, and these global volatilities will have an impact on the energy security within your country. It could be in the form of rupee depreciation. It could be in the form of, right, increased cost of this in the global market, or it could be in the form of sudden cut in the supply, which will disrupt the whole supply chain within the domestic market as well. And not to forget, because of high import dependence as well as the global uncertainty or the volatility, it will also have an impact on your trade deficit as well as current account deficit. Right? Very recently, I'm pretty sure you have come across all of these particular factors, by the way. But in addition to these particular factors, there are many other issues. Many other issues. For example, not having sufficient storage capacity. Not having sufficient storage capacity. Very often, in the context of energy security in India, you will come across the issue that is the duck curve problem. There's a technical term, duck curve problem. That is, government of India is promoting production of electricity through, right, let's say renewable sources. But the problem is there is a difference in at what point of time the production peaks in India and at what point of time the demand peaks in India. Right. So because there's a difference in the timing of peaking of production as well as the demand for the electricity, because we do not have sufficient storage capacity. We do not have sufficient storage capacity. Lot of the installed capacity remains unutilized, especially renewable energy. Especially the renewable energy. Done. So these are some of the issues. Again, these are some of the issues or the key challenges for India's energy security. Now, what measures do you suggest for ensuring energy security along with economic growth as well as sustainability? Obviously, you will have to recommend promotion of green sources for energy production. Renewable sources, right? In fact, Government of India is doing this, by the way. Very recently, for example, the Government of India has launched an initiative where, right, a solar floating, right, plants will be installed. Floating plants for solar production will be installed. In fact, within that particular scheme itself, the Government of India also has a condition that there has to be storage capacity that has to be installed, because the government knows there is a problem with supply as well as demand, especially within the renewable energy. So one, we will have to focus on renewable energy. There is no other doubt. Second one, right, reduce the demand for, right, the right natural sources of energy, such as, right, let's say coal. How can that be done? Basically, right, a shift to other forms of usage of energy. Shift to other forms of usage of energy. For example, right, there is, like I said earlier, there is a promotion for renewable energy, but there is one problem with the renewable energy projects, that is financing. That is where the green financing, right, the green financing has to be promoted more by the government. In fact, the government is doing, but there's a need to promote a bit more in terms of green financing as well. That is, ensure that easy loans at lower rate of interest are available for the borrowers. And the third one is other forms of green sources. Reduce the dependence, right, and promote other forms of green sources. For example, right, the usage of, right, green ammonia, etc. So all these can be the recommendations that you will be providing or you should have provided in order to ensure that on one side sufficient production and supply of electricity will be available, which is necessary for growth as well as development. And at the same point of time, we are able to ensure that this is sustainable as well. This is sustainable as well, right? So you can quote examples of green bonds, green deposits, etc., as some of the reforms which have been implemented already in India. Okay. Question number 12 now. How are startups in India promoting entrepreneurship, innovation, and employment? Discuss the global and domestic challenges in their working and suggest suitable measures to overcome these challenges. The reason why this kind of question has been asked is because very recently Startup India has completed a decade of its implementation. Startup India has completed a decade. Now, what is the importance of startups in India? What is the importance? Simple. The startups do not focus on the traditional businesses. They do not focus on traditional businesses. They focus on other areas. That is basically new age business. They will focus on new age businesses. And when they focus on new age businesses, obviously their focus will be on investment in R&D, research and development. They want to develop a patent. They want to develop a copyright. They want to develop a design and have intellectual property control over these particular, right, let's say investments in R&D. Second, obviously these particular new age businesses are involved in creating lot of jobs as well. Lot of jobs, right? They are going to create and they have created it. Of course, there's a concern associated with this. We'll come to that as well. And in addition to this, they will contribute to the growth of Indian economy by producing goods and services. They will contribute to the growth of the economy. So no doubt they are contributing in all of these particular areas. They are contributing to all of these areas. But please understand, the question is also asking what are the global as well as the domestic challenges in their working. What are the global and the domestic challenges in their working? Right? The issues associated with the startups in India are one, have a look at this. Compared to other countries in India, the focus on high tech R&D is very low. High tech R&D. What do I mean by high tech R&D? Let's use a very technical term here, deep tech. Let's use a technical term, deep tech, or else semiconductors, or else, right? Basically, one more current affairs term, artificial intelligence. So, when you compare the startups' investments in other countries, compare that with in India, how much are the startups able to generate or invest in all of these particular areas? There is a lacune, there is a huge difference. That is a precise reason when last year, right, when there was a startup, right, let's say initiative startup Manthan was conducted, right, the Minister for Commerce and Industry in India criticized some of the startups and stated that where other countries are focused on investing in artificial intelligence, the Indian startups are more focused on producing, right, novelty ice creams. They're focused on, right, how to deliver, right, let's say food products within 10 minutes, whereas other countries are focused on deep tech technologies. So there was a criticism. No doubt that is true, by the way. To a certain extent, that is equally true. Anyways, so first one is the investments in these particular, let's say, right, defining areas or important areas in India is much, much lower. The startups in numbers are also very less compared to other countries. You can quote the example of Taiwan, USA, and China. And this happens for a very simple reason. Please remember, you'll have to write one more technical term. There is a lack of patient capital in India. There is a lack of patient capital in India. What do you mean by patient capital? This is a kind of investment that is willing to stay for a longer duration. Right? This patient, don't misunderstand the word patient. Right? That patient is different and this patient is different. So patient capital basically means the capital, that is the investments which is willing to be invested and they are willing to wait for a longer duration. They don't want returns immediately. They are okay with waiting for a long time. So the absence or very less amount of patient capital also hurts investments in startups in India. It also hurts investments in the startups in India. Third very important issue associated with the startups is the funding. The funding winter. Please write this. The funding winter. Right? Earlier, when there was a pandemic, a lot of investors withdrew their money from other sources or other forms of investment and started putting all of this money into a lot of startups. After recovery, there is right basically a huge pause in investments that were flowing into the startups. Lot of these particular startups are finding it very difficult to raise the funds in the market now. Why? Market has recovered. Investors are more interested in investing in the market rather than in the startups. Rather than in the startups. Right? And right, in addition to this, one more very important issue, right? One more very important issue that is a challenge for startups is a financial viable model. A financial viable model. That is, understand this. A startup can produce a good, can have a prototype, but that doesn't mean that the company will be able to make profits by selling this particular good in the market. What if this kind of a good doesn't have that much amount of a demand in the market? What if they're not able to generate sufficient amount of revenue to take care of their expenses for a longer duration? Of course, a lot of these particular startups do not generate revenues immediately. They do not generate revenues immediately, although they will have very, very high valuations. A lot of these startups are shutting down immediately after, right, let's say, certain time period. Why? They are not able to have a financially viable model in the businesses. So these are some of the issues that are plaguing the startups in the domestic market. And in the intro you write this. India has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. India has the third largest ecosystem in the world, right? In terms of startups, by the way. Right? So suggest suitable measures to overcome these challenges. You can in fact write, very recently the government of India has implemented certain reforms to promote the startups in India. Recently, by the way, not old. Of course, Startup India is an initiative, but that's a bit old initiative, which has completed more than 10 years in India. For example, right, the scheme to promote seed funding, right, the government of India has increased the funding, right, to 20,000 crores under that. For deep tech startups, the definition has been revised very recently. For the normal startups also, the definition has been revised very recently. In addition to this, in order to promote research and development, not just in startups, but in overall research and development, Government of India has launched RDI initiative as well. So multiple reforms have been undertaken by the government in order to address the issues faced by the startup ecosystem in India. Done? Okay, question number 13 now. How Indian agriculture has been transformed from food scarcity to food surplus level. Explain the various government policies implemented for diversification of Indian agriculture. This is a kind of question which is asking you to summarize what has happened in India's agriculture in the last 80 years. Very simple. The question is asking you what has government of India done in last 80 years in agriculture sector, by the way, because it is starting with food scarcity situation to food surplus situation. From scarcity you have reached surplus. What has government of India done? So rather than writing individual names of the schemes, don't write individual schemes. Have an overall approach. Overall, in the sense, what are the different, right, let's say, steps or supply chains in the overall agriculture sector. From availability of seeds to irrigation to, right, let's say, promotion of marketing in agriculture, promotion of exports in agriculture, ensuring the farmers are going to get, right, let's say, income support, to technology support, etc., etc. If everybody is able to understand this, please don't write individual schemes. Why? In that case, you're expected to write what are the different schemes for 80 years. That is not possible, by the way. So you know the whole supply chain, right? From input to, right, output, And in between, there is harvesting, there is a storage, there is marketing, marketing within the domestic market as well as export market. So, what has the government of India done at every step? If you can summarize that and also quote one or two schemes, right, in discussion, that will be a very good answer. That will be a very good answer. For example, in terms of input, the government of India has ensured through the priority sector lending, loans are available for the farmers. Through the Kisan credit card, right, easier loans are available for the farmers. By providing subsidies for fertilizers, right, the inputs are not very costly for the farmers. In fact, right, there is a recent initiative such as submission on agriculture mechanization which is being promoted for adoption of drone technology, etc. Then there is harvesting, right? Or before that, you can also mention irrigation as well as harvesting. What kind of measures have been undertaken by the government in order to assist in terms of irrigation as well as harvesting? For example, free electricity, free electricity, right? Or very recently, the initiative of, right, let's say, no, promoting installation of, right, solar panels under an initiative, and there is a technical term for that as well, which is being promoted by the government now, agrovoltaics. Those who have read today's Hindu newspaper, there was an article on agrovoltaics in today's Hindu newspaper itself. This is how you need to keep on incorporating certain things, right? For example, storage. The government has been promoting the participation of cooperatives to set up storage. The government of India has promoted, right, the because of the recommendation of Shanta Kumar committee, it is also promoting e-negotiable warehouse receipt system. In case of marketing, one district, one product. Udan initiative where transportation of agriculture commodities are being done. Right? Exports are through APEDA, right? Promotion of warehousing, etc. So everybody is able to understand the logic here. Please do not write individual schemes as examples here, that is one by one. Rather than that, cover these particular stages in the agriculture sector and simply say, over a period of time, because of these particular reforms, India has become the largest producer of, let's say, rice, which has been the recent achievement in India. It has also become a largest milk producer, which is agriculture and allied sector, which is also largest exporter of many of these agriculture commodities, etc. Right? So these are some of the initiatives that has helped government of India, or that has been implemented by the government of India, to shift India's agriculture from scarcity to surplus situation. Done. And through these particular reforms, you can also prove that these government reforms also have helped in diversification. Right? For example, you can quote PM Asha, wherein the government basically procures different kinds of crops. Right? So, question number 14 now. Right? Question number 14. Discuss the different types of subsidies and the support provided by the government of India to agriculture sector. Examine the related issues pertaining to agreement on agriculture of World Trade Organization. Right? What are the different types of subsidies and support that is provided by the government in the agriculture sector, specifically agriculture sector? Right? For example, you have direct subsidies, you have direct subsidies, you have indirect subsidies, you have input subsidies, input subsidies, you also have, right, export subsidy. And for all of these, I hope you understand, you'll have to write one statement each and give one example. One statement each and give one example. Right? You also have infrastructure subsidy. So these are the different types of subsidies that the government of India, right, generally provides in the agriculture sector. In the agriculture sector. So that is first part of the question. First part of the question. Examine the related issues pertaining to agreement on agriculture of World Trade Organization. Examine the issues. Now please understand, under World Trade Organization, there is an agreement on agriculture. India is a signatory. India is a signatory. Now, why there is a discussion on agreement on agriculture? Very simple. Under agreement on agriculture, there are three pillars essentially. There are three pillars. One is right, basically the market, the market support, right? Then there is I'm sorry. One is domestic support, which is the most important pillar, by the way. Second one is export subsidies, right? So there are different types of pillars under agreement on agriculture. Now focus on the domestic support. Why this is the contention? This is the point of contention, by the way. Domestic support. Under the domestic support, it basically says that there is a de minimis level. And in the de minimis level, it will restrict the government subsidies to the farmers which are trade distorting to the maximum level of 10% of value of production. It limits, right, the agreement basically limits that the government which is providing the subsidies to the farmers, it cannot be more than 10% of value of production. And by the way, these are basically, right, let's say the trade distorting subsidies. The trade distorting subsidies. And these particular subsidies under the agreement on agriculture are fundamentally divided into three boxes. One is basically the green box subsidies, which are not at all trade distorting or negligible trade distorting. Then there is amber box subsidies. These are absolutely trade distorting. And then there is a blue box subsidy. Then there is a blue box subsidy. These are trade distorting but are used for limiting agriculture production, containing agriculture production. And that's the reason under agreement on agriculture, these particular subsidies which are directly trade distorting have to be limited to 10% of value of production. Now come to the question here. Examine the related issues pertaining to agreement on agriculture. What are the issues here? Issues very simple. Government of India argues that these conditions which were imposed when situation of agriculture in India were completely different. India's agriculture situation was completely different because please understand these agreements were discussed and finalized and implemented from right the date of implementation of World Trade Organization 1995. So back then, the situation of India was different compared to today. That is the first issue. Second issue is India does not agree with the calculation methodology. That's the second issue. Third, very important issue is Government of India simply says in India, huge number of people depend on agriculture for work as well as daily livelihood. According to survey, 46% of the population which is working in India is there in the agriculture sector. So, because we have large number of farmers who are small and marginal, government assistance is required. Fourth very important issue, India has very large population of poor people who need assistance from the government. That is the precise reason the government of India will end up procuring the food grain, pay MSP, which is a trade distorting subsidy, and use it for public distribution. And the fifth very important issue, Government of India simply says, compare how much subsidies are given per farmer in India and other countries, developing countries, with per farmer subsidy given in developed economies. There, it is in terms of thousands of dollars. In India, it is below $100. So, per farmer, the subsidy given by the developed economies is very, very high. For India, it is very less. So, there has to be an exemption provided to India. You cannot basically impose restrictions. These are the various issues that Government of India has raised in the context of agreement on agriculture of World Trade Organization. Done? Right? So, these are right the various questions which have been asked in today's GS paper 3, which was in the first session, conducted in the first session. Some of these particular questions straightforward from, right, let's say the notes that you have read. And some of these particular questions, right, there was a challenge because you are expected to summarize various reforms which have been implemented for a very long duration. If you have liked this particular discussion, do not forget to hit the like button. If you're ready to join the Unacademy IAS YouTube channel, kindly do it right now. Let me hand over the discussion to Mukesh sir.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. And I hope we would have taken a look at the paper. And when it comes to environment and ecology, you had two questions. Both the questions were very, very direct and very much on the expected lines. So, if you would have covered or gone through the basic idea of environment ecology, you should have expected these areas and you should have covered these portions. We have covered it in the UCAN sessions, in the static portions as well. And any of you who would have taken a look at the content, you would have been able to solve that as well. I hope everybody has found that to be easy. Now, you had two questions in environment and ecology, one associated with the Kunming biodiversity framework and a part of the Kunming Montreal Agreement, and the second one associated with solid waste management rules. Now, we are also going to talk about that why this question was asked only this year. After all, Kunming Montreal Agreement is a couple of years old now. So, question number 8, discuss the aim and goals of Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Mention India's commitments and initiatives to achieve the goals and targets of this framework, giving suitable examples. Now, I always have said in the sessions as well, environment and ecology is beyond ratifying the national parks and the wildlife sanctuaries. So, when you talk about Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, if you are writing the answer, you have to talk about the transition from where? From HE targets to the Kunming Montreal Agreement. That basic idea you have to talk about, right? Because earlier, before Kunming Montreal Agreement, you had the CBD talking about the HE targets. HE targets were finalized where in the case of the Nagoya Protocol and at the time of the Nagoya Convention as well. So that is where you had the HE targets and that has to be talked about. So in the introduction, you can mention about the case of the Convention on Biological Diversity has finalized the global biodiversity framework with both long term and short term targets. Long term target to be achieved till 2050, short term target to be achieved till 2030. Now, in the short term target, what are the targets that need to be highlighted? You have to highlight the targets such as the 30 by 30 target that you have, that is to bring 30% of the land area under conservation, oceanic regions under conservation by 2030. You have to talk about reducing the case or the influence of the invasive alien species by 50% by 2030, then reducing the human induced extinction. All these are some of the primary targets that you have to talk about. But one of the major portions that candidates oftentimes miss out in the case of the achievement of Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is the role of private financing. Now, this is a global biodiversity framework which talks about the private accountability as well, to hold the private sector accountable in order to justify from where they are producing whatever they are producing, and also responsible consumption, responsible production, and mobilizing the huge amount of private financing. So, that is important to be highlighted. So once you have highlighted the first part of your answer, now then mention India's commitments and initiatives to achieve the goals and the targets. Now, why has this follow up been asked? Is the reason why this question is asked this year. That is because in the month of March this year, 2026, India basically submitted its overall national the biodiversity targets that it has. So the seventh biodiversity plan, okay, seventh biodiversity plan was submitted by India. Okay, we have covered that in the Conquer Mains also, if you would have observed in the UCAN sessions as well. Now, as per the seventh biodiversity plan, what did India do and why did it release it? So, this was mandated by the members of the CBD, okay, mandated by the members of the CBD to be achieved by 2030. And that is why you find the relevance of this particular question, why it has been asked this year. Now, what are the parts of this biodiversity plan? One is the updation of national biodiversity strategy and action plan. So that has been updated. Okay. Now that you have to provide that information, that this national biodiversity strategy and action plan has been updated this year, and that has invoked or brought in newer targets into place within the country itself, and has set the country on the course to achieving the 23 targets set by the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Once you have mentioned that, then as per the national biodiversity plan, the seventh biodiversity plan which was updated, you have some of the subparts of it. So those were the key areas that had to be mentioned. That is national biodiversity target 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, what were these national biodiversity targets 1, 2, 3, and 4? One, biodiversity inclusive land and sea use planning. Now, this basically included the case of the forest reserves. Okay. The forest reserves that you have, and also the case of the carbon sink. Now, carbon sink was also in news in terms of India's updated NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution to United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, where India has provided its commitment that we will be updating or increasing the carbon stock in our country. So this is very much a part of that same plan. So the forest reserves, and here in that national biodiversity target number 1, India has talked about the increase in the forest cover, increase in forest and tree cover. Okay. Now, this is something that you had to mention. As per what? Increase in the forest and tree cover based on what? Based upon the India State of Forest Report 2023. Based upon that, India has highlighted that we have increased even the mangrove cover, and that has brought about the coastal conservation. Okay. Then, other than that, the ecosystem restoration, NBT2. Now, this National Biodiversity Target number 2, ecosystem restoration, talks about controlling degradation and desertification. As per the World Atlas of Degradation and Desertification, you already have close to around 29 million hectares of land which are getting degraded and are on the verge of being desertified. India has also taken up the part of the Bond Challenge. Okay, Bond Challenge. Now, what is this Bond Challenge? Bond Challenge, launched by IUCN and the government of Germany in particular, that is to bring about or control the land degradation, to bring about what is known as land degradation neutrality. Again, a basic concept in environment ecology. If you are not covering these concepts, please analyze and ask yourself, what is it that you are studying for environment and ecology? This is very much required if you have to clear the mains examination. Very, very much required. Now, in this bond challenge, what is the end date? 2030 is the end date. That matches with our biodiversity action plan as well. That matches with the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework short-term target as well. Now, in this bond challenge, it is about controlling the amount of land degradation and desertification which is happening. The commitment is close to around 29 million hectares that India has committed. Now, out of that, 24 million hectares already the degraded land have been reclaimed. So we are well on track to achieve this bond challenge, and that is where NBT2 becomes a successful initiative as well. Then NBT3, conservation and the protected areas. Now, this is about declaration of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, the case of the tiger reserves, elephant reserves, and the overall protection of biodiversity hotspots. In that particular case, our country, we have increased the number of Ramsar sites, right? Within a few years, we have taken it to more than 100, which makes India third globally in terms of the total number of declared Ramsar sites. Now, that is again associated with the conservation of biodiversity, greater conservation of the protected areas through the amendments of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So that also should be mentioned. More number of tiger reserves. The tiger population in our country has been increasing, and that will merge with your NBT4, that is the species recovery. Here, the tiger census, Now you had the all India census for the elephant population also. The first time the census for the snow leopard has also happened. Lion census has also happened. All of this has indicated the increase in the recovery of the species. With the case of the one-horned rhino, our success in terms of the rhino mission, our success in terms of the St. Petersburg Declaration for the overall tiger protection. Again, all of these, those of you who are beginners might appear to be out in the blue. Why is he bombarding us with so many facts? But in reality, again, everything is something which is covered in the class. So you shouldn't have faced a problem. Other than this, you also have another initiative that you have to talk about, and that is trees outside forests. Outside forests. This is basically where agroforestry in our country has to be provided a kind of an importance, and that is indicated by the India State of Forest report as well, that trees outside forest, that population has also been increasing, and that has also allowed for conservation of species across the ecotone. So these are the country specific initiatives that you could write. In the conclusion, what you have to do, a kind of a way forward, that we have come a long way, but in order to ensure that we meet not only the CBD goals, but also the goals of the climate change, we have to ensure that this is done on a war footing and not only limited to the protected areas. Then, after that, basically, we come to the next question. Before that, for all of you who are taking a look at the mains exam paper, since a couple of days ago, we had been discussing essay paper, GS paper 1, GS paper 2, now GS paper 3. Now, all of this indicates the importance of visiting the basic areas. And the questions are very generic, guys. Please understand this. So, every Tom, Dick, and Harry will have an idea that, okay, this is a question that I can answer. So, that differentiating factor in the mains examination will be dependent upon how detailed information you are able to provide. For that, we have come up with the advanced mains program. Okay, so you have dedicated mains program in terms of the PYQ based themes and expected areas. For example, over the past year, these were the expected areas along with NDCs. Now these are the expected areas. So answer writing in terms of that, evaluation based on that, weekly 5 questions for practice, all of this is available to you. In case you are a student of platinum, this is available to you automatically. So either choose this, or you can be a part of the platinum program and take the larger guided mentorship from the educators and be a part of the answer writing cohort as well. Ensure next attempt is not just an attempt for prelims. Ensure that the next attempt is the attempt where you get the rank. Now, the last question: what are the challenges to solid waste management in India? Discuss the governmental policy framework in solid waste management. This is one or a couple of parts of the question. Then discuss the success or failure cases of Delhi and Indore cities, highlighting salient features of their solid waste management initiative. Now, what do you have to mention in this? First thing that you have to mention here is the challenges to solid waste management in India. Now, what are the challenges to the solid waste management in our country? First is the lack of enough collection centers, right? Enough amount of waste is not collected. Secondly, you have to talk about the case of lack of proper segregation of the waste, then processing of the waste. You have close to around 1.84 lakh tons. Again, this was released this year itself. This data, why was it released this year? In the month of January, you had a change in solid waste management rules 2026. That was a change which was brought in this year, targeting the bulk generators and also the legacy waste. Legacy waste, what you observe in Delhi, for example, the garbage mounds and the garbage hills. So, this was brought in this year. So, it was expected a question can be asked whether the candidates are aware of this or not. Because last time, when the solid waste management rules were in the picture in 2016, right? At that point of time, UPSC had also picked up this and a direct question was framed. So you take a look at the pattern of the past decade. So what are the challenges? So 1.84 lakh tons per day are generated. Now, out of these 1.84 lakh tons, you will find that only around 1.79 lakh tons are collected. So, first of all, proper case of reportage is not there, that how much is generated, then how much is collected, there is already a gap, then how much is processed is much lower. So that is where there is a lot of waste which is not even collected, not even segregated. Then you have the problem of commingled waste. Then you have the case or the issue, because first you have to highlight the challenges. Other than that, you also have the case of the challenges associated with the waste logistics, the commodity market when it comes to, for example, e-waste. In the e-waste, for example, China has had a very good and a matured market in terms of segregation of valuable and precious minerals from e-waste. That is something which is not prevalent in our country. So that also can be highlighted. Municipal solid waste, inadequate amount of STPs, for example. So that is also something which can be highlighted. Now you have the case of the governmental policies. What are the governmental policies that you have to talk about? So solid waste management rules 2016. Okay. Then you have to talk about the plastic waste management rules, particularly the amendment, which is important. You had the amendment in one of the major ones, 22-23, and then you had the amendment in 2026. Okay. Then after that, you also have to talk about the Swachh Bharat mission initiatives in order to create the ODF conditions. Now the SWM amendment in 2026. Now, here, as per the SWM amendment of Solid Waste Management Amendment of 2026, what is there? You have the bulk generators who are targeted, bulk generators of the waste, right? Now, bulk generators have been defined. These can basically be your generators associated with the government offices, buildings, private societies. They have been targeted. Mandatory on site treatment of the biodegradable waste is required. This has to be highlighted. On site treatment of the biodegradable waste is required. Then, other than that, you also have the case of the four-step segregation of the waste. Four-step segregation of the waste. That these wastes, based upon the dry waste, special waste, kitchen waste, it has to be segregated. And each of them have their own mandated requirement. Other than that, you also have the increased utility of the reduced derived fuel, that is the pelletization of the solid waste, that has been done with the help of pyrolysis, so that their requirement in terms of the cottage industries, etc., that has been mandated. But because Indore, Delhi have been mentioned, right? So something you have to include there. But with the larger country aspect, one aspect which is very important in the Solid Waste Management Amendment 2026 is the power given to hilly and island regions. They can basically restrict the number of tourists, charge a special levy, and other than that, the reportage associated with the legacy waste. That is where the garbage hills come into place. The legacy waste. Now, in the case of the legacy waste, there is a kind of quarterly reporting which has been mandated as well. So, that also should be highlighted. That also should be definitely mentioned out of this. Okay. Then, what you do is you basically pick up the case of Indore. Now, what you will solve or what you will also explain in the case of Indore, you will not only talk about careful waste uh, collection centers, transportation, that is something you will definitely mention. But with the help of Indore, you will also talk about the conditions of bioremediation. Bioremediation. Okay. That is where sanitary landfills, conversion of these waste garbage dumps into parks. That is what Indore has been a success story about. Then periodic reportage. then the case of competitive federalism also can be brought into the picture here. Then in the case of Delhi, when you talk about, you have to talk about both success as well as failure. The failure is, it can start with the case of inadequate number of sewage treatment plants, then the case of the river systems being polluted, then you can talk about the legacy garbage waste which is generated, you can talk about the seepage or the kind of penetration of chemicals and leaching through the landfills which has impacted the groundwater. These are your failures. So what is the success story? You have the RCC done of these various different canals and the nalas, ensuring cleaner water, construction of more sewage treatment plants along the way, taking these garbage piles and the garbage hills and converting them into reusable materials, waste segregation at the region of the garbage piles. So you have to highlight each one of them separately. Enough content to be filling up the 15 marker requirement. Okay, so I hope you guys would have found this particular portion very easy and very, very doable. Which one out of them did you find to be unexpected, if at all? Do let us know in the comment section. And now we will have Chetan sir taking over for the portion of the internal security and disaster management. Thank you for staying with us. Look at the discussion for internal security and disaster management.
Hello, everyone. I hope all of you have seen the questions by now. So, now I'll be discussing the questions from internal security and disaster management. So, as always, there were 6 questions that had come from security and disaster management, 4 from internal security, 2 from disaster management. So, the 4 questions from internal security accounted for 50 marks, 2 10-mark questions and 2 15-mark questions. Then the 2 questions from disaster management, they accounted for 25 marks, one 10-mark question, one 15-mark question. So in total, 75 marks just from internal security and disaster management. So let's look at the questions one by one. But what is interesting is that all the questions that were given here, in fact, across GS paper 3 and even yesterday's GS paper 2, the topics that have been picked are pretty standard topics, meaning you can directly find a reference to these topics in the syllabus given by UPSC, which means unlike previous years, no vague current affairs topics have been picked. So students who have covered their syllabus, focused on their static portion, their conceptual knowledge with current affairs linkages, they would have definitely written better answers this time. Yes, the questions appear easy, right, as they are all standard topics. But however, can you write the most perfect answer? How will you structure that? Can you fit within the word limit? Because most of the questions are having a lot of sub parts or sub questions, and your answer will have to do justice to all the sub questions which are present. So, can you do that within 150 words and 250 words? That is the big challenge. So, let's see how you could have approached them, starting with question number 9, a question on the misuse of social media and the threats posed by the misuse of social media and internet based platforms. The question is asking, explain how fake news and disinformation pose a threat to internal security and public order in the Indian context. So, that is the first part of the question. In this regard, discuss salient features of the amendments that have been done to the IT rules of 2021. So essentially, the second part of the question is referring to the recent amendments that were done to the IT rules and the new changes that have been introduced to strengthen the regulation against social media intermediaries. So, for this particular question, you can start by talking about the menace of fake news and disinformation. Present an overview regarding how manipulated information can go viral on social media. Talk about the unique features of new media compared to traditional media. Traditional media, such as newspapers or radio or TV, there used to be a lag between the event occurring and the communication being reported. Whereas on social media, the reporting is instantaneous. And almost everyone with a phone, with an internet connection, can become a content creator. So when there is no focus on content quality,
on fact checking, it's quite easy to spread lies, rumors, misinformation. You can spread half truths, mix it with lies, and basically manufacture something which has never occurred. So, present that view regarding how fake news can be harmful. See, some fake news could be having no malicious intent behind it, it could be created just for fun. But what if it is used for disinformation, where a deliberate attempt is made to discredit someone, to discredit an individual or a nation or a religion or an institution? This is where the threat arises. So, present this argument about fake news and disinformation, which is very rampant on social media and online media platforms. Then, when you come to the body, illustrate these threats one by one. Break it down into 3 4 points. For example, how misuse of social media platforms through fake news and disinformation can result in security problems, how it can disturb public order or law and order. You can talk about instigation of riots or communal polarization by dividing religions on sensitive issues, or manipulation of elections, or even the spread of radical extremist ideology, especially by terror groups. So, for each of them, try to give some real world examples from the Indian context. Take, for example, the Azad Maidan riots and following the Kokrajhar riots in Assam, how a paranoia was created based on fake news that was spreading on online platforms, that Northeast people would be targeted, which led to an exodus of people from the Northeast, which triggered a riot like situation, disturbance of public order back in 2012. Or you can talk about the communal polarization between, let's say, Hindus and Muslims, or exploiting the Khalistan issue, for example, to divide the Sikh community, right? So, such examples can be quoted from the Indian context. Manipulation of elections, how political parties, political consulting firms, they often rely on social media data, they profile the voters, and they target them with advertisements. They target them with paid news. They try to undermine the political opponents with fake news and disinformation. They will over exaggerate the achievements of a certain party or a certain leader. So this could undermine democracy itself. Maybe here you can draw a parallel with United States and how in the presidential elections of 2016 there were active attempts made to manipulate the elections and influence the voters with fake news and disinformation. Then talk about terror groups such as Islamic State, how the Indian youth have often been targeted with radical ideology, which is circulated on social media platforms, including Telegram, other encrypted applications, and how it has led to recruitment of Indian youth by brainwashing and indoctrinating the youth. So, 3 4 examples with the Indian context would be more than sufficient. That completes half of your answer. Then comes the second part of your answer, the second part of the body, where you're expected to talk about the recent amendments done to the IT rules of 2021. So here you can go a little in depth. You can point out that IT rules were notified under the IT Act of 2000 under the provisions of Section 79, so that it shows that you have a deeper understanding of this particular provision, pointing out the legal basis on which the IT rules have been built. Then focus on the new amendments. The IT rules of 2021, it was brought out to regulate social media intermediaries, OTT platforms, digital media. That was the initial intention. But it was amended a couple of years ago to even regulate the online gaming industry, as online games were not only leading to addiction amongst the youth, it was also promoting the habit of gambling, where real money betting was used. And the same platforms were being used by criminal networks and terror groups to carry out their covert communication by exploiting the chat rooms in online gaming platforms. So, with the amendment that was done, online gaming also has now been brought under the ambit of the IT rules. But more recently, another amendment was done through which the due diligence requirements have been increased by the government. See, social media intermediaries, they are obligated under IT rules to ensure that they cooperate with law enforcement and with the government to block and take down objectionable content, content which could pose an immediate threat to law and order. Or after a incident has occurred, they have a duty to oblige with the authorities to share data regarding those users and the originator of these harmful messages so that investigations can progress. Now, if they don't comply, they can be held in violation of the due diligence. And based on that, the safe harbor which is provided, the legal immunity which is granted under Section 79 can be withdrawn by the government, and the company executives can be held criminally liable. That is something you have to bring out. Now, with the new amendment, the duration which was given, the time that was provided for the social media intermediaries, it has been drastically reduced. Previously, before the amendment, they had up to 24 to 36 hours to take down any objectionable content or block content which was, let's say, promoting nudity, right? Or where rape videos, child pornographic videos were being circulated. Now, this time duration has been reduced to just 2 to 3 hours, which means the social media firms have to act in real time. They should have a resident grievance redressal officer. They should have a chief compliance officer who are residents in India so that they will be the point of contact for the law enforcement agencies. And once they are issued the orders, they have to show due diligence within the next 2 to 3 hours. In case of false information, which is threatening public order, in case of, let's say, sensitive, objectionable content, it has to be removed within 3 hours. And if the content contains nudity, pornographic visuals, which can affect the dignity of women, for example, such content will have to be blocked within 2 hours. So the time duration provided has been drastically reduced. Another important provision with the new amendment is with regard to AI created content, algorithmically generated synthetic content. The new IT rules, right? It defines synthetic content. Essentially, it's a reference to deep fakes, the hyper realistic images, visuals, which can be generated through AI algorithms, through AI large language models, like ChatGPT, for example, how it can be misused to create a fake narrative. So, this is defined under the new set of IT rules following the amendment. It defines what is synthetic content, which is algorithmically generated, and it mandates the platforms to label AI generated content. It has to be clearly marked as AI generated so that the users have the awareness that this content is a deep fake. And it also provides a lot of administrative flexibility to state governments, which was previously not present. Now, state governments can appoint any other designated authorities to take action under the IT rules and issue takedown orders and blocking orders. So these are some big changes that have been introduced, which will help strengthen the enforcement of IT rules and curb the menace of fake news and disinformation. So present this analysis in the second part of the body. So basically around 4 or 5 amendments which have been done, listed point wise, and then conclude your answer. In the conclusion, try to bring out the critical view about IT rules, which is that it provides a lot of discretion for the police and law enforcement, which could be misused by the ruling parties to cripple dissent, to target criticism, which could affect your fundamental right to free speech and expression under Article 19. You can even point out that there should be a balance. Of course, your free speech is not absolute, right? The fundamental right to free speech and expression is not an absolute right. It comes with reasonable restrictions. So, IT rules, you can mention that it should strike a balance between the provisions of Article 19 and the need to uphold security of the state and public order in the society. Now, let's look at the next question. But before that, I have a very important announcement. Many students often struggle with preparation for mains, especially when it comes to mains answer writing. So, based on the demand of the students, we are launching a new initiative dedicated for mains answer writing, the Advanced Mains Program. It starts from 2nd September, it will continue till the 10th of January. It includes 240 plus hours of dedicated classes across subjects. And what we will do in the program is that we will follow the PYQs to provide a thematic discussion of different topics where topics have been repeating. For example, in today's paper, look at the internal security question on BADP, Border Area Development Program. It's a repeat topic. Just a few years ago, a similar question had been asked, right? But this year, the question is in the context of Ladakh, But the topic of BADP, which is a border management topic, is the same. It's a repeat topic. Even IT rules, which is linked to your Digital Data Protection Act, that topic also has been repeated 2-3 times by UPSC. There was a question on Justice B. N. Sri Krishna Committee, questions on the Personal Data Protection Act, right? So when you focus on theme-based PYQs and approach your answer writing based on this strategy, it will actually help you develop that insight which is required to cover the right kind of topics, especially for dynamic subjects like internal security and the others. We will also discuss probable questions. We will cover the static concepts at a higher level, not from scratch, but we'll also discuss the current affairs, interlinking the two. And we will also provide you weekly tests with evaluation and the detailed feedback. And the program also includes a full length test at the end of the program and handouts and notes given for every class. So this program is priced at 9,999. If you're interested, please check out the link provided in the description box below. Now let's look at the second question from security. It's focused on the recent protests in Ladakh, the demand for sixth schedule status, the demand for constitutional autonomy. It's pointing out the strategic location of Ladakh. It's referring to the recent demand for sixth schedule status and the role of programs like BADP and the civic action taken up by the Indian Army. The question reads, Ladakh is strategically located between China and Pakistan. As a measure to win hearts and minds of locals, discuss the border area development program by the central government and civic action by the army. Also discuss demand of promulgation of provision of the sixth schedule of constitution for Ladakh. It seems like a long question, but if you break it down, there are actually three parts. And trust me, if you follow the right approach, it's quite easy to answer this. You can start with the strategic location of Ladakh. Maybe you can even draw a rough map to show how Ladakh is strategically positioned between China and Pakistan, where we have standing disputes with both of them. The Pakistan occupied Kashmir and the occupied Gilgit-Baltistan region on one side, and the Aksai Chin region that is occupied by China on the other side. And Ladakh itself is made up of the Leh and the Kargil region with a very distinct demography. Leh region is Buddhist dominated, Kargil region is Muslim dominated. And Ladakh opens towards China's Xinjiang province, towards the north. Right? It includes strategic locations like Siachen Glacier and the Shaksgam Valley region, which Pakistan has leased to China. So present a geographical analysis, a geopolitical analysis of the location of Ladakh, why it is important as a frontier region. Then you can talk about the unique environmental and social aspects of Ladakh. How Ladakh is home to nomadic tribes. How the environment and ecology and biodiversity of Ladakh is very sensitive. It is prone to the impact of climate change. It is affected by multiple disasters, including earthquakes, landslides, floods, and it's facing the impact of global warming, right? How it affects the pasture lands that are available and how it can impact the animal husbandry which is practiced by the nomadic tribes and why they are demanding for more autonomy, more flexibility in local administration to protect their indigenous rights. When you look at the sixth schedule provisions, currently we have autonomous district councils created in the northeast in 4 states, in Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya, and Mizoram. A total of 10 autonomous districts are already functioning. A similar demand is being made in Ladakh. So point out the unique socio-environmental aspects and why the demand exists for greater autonomy. See, Ladakh already has statutory autonomy, right? You have a autonomous development council for the Ladakh region with a Leh council and a Kargil autonomous district council. But they don't enjoy constitutional status under the sixth schedule. Because under sixth schedule status, these autonomous district councils will enjoy a much higher degree of autonomy. For example, they have a higher flexibility when it comes to administrative powers, executive powers, judicial and financial powers. This helps the local communities to protect their customs, their social practices, their religion, their faith, more importantly, their land and their resources. Today, Ladakh is experiencing over tourism. Ecologically, the region is very fragile, and the large infrastructure projects, which are strategic in nature, which are being pursued, poses a threat to the sensitive environment of the region. So bring out this contradiction that exists. And that basically takes you to the point to talk about the protests in Ladakh. Why the people are protesting for demanding sixth schedule status. And then point out why it is important for the state and the security forces, including the Indian Army, to win the hearts and minds of the border population. That in itself is an important concept. If you have attended my classes in Unacademy Platinum or Plus, or if you took up the recent Conquer Mains program, there I had discussed the very same concept in detail under border management. It is important to prioritize border development because you cannot afford to alienate your border population. Generally, border areas are remote. It has a very difficult, challenging topography. So, if you don't create the right infrastructure, if you don't provide opportunities and basic amenities in the border regions, it creates a sense of resentment. It creates a sense of alienation. It also results in outward migration of the people towards cities in search of opportunities. And you might see a depopulation occurring in your border regions. So, this could adversely affect your national security because hostile neighbors can misuse this. They can turn the local population against the state, instigate rebellions, or turn them into spies, or use them to create logistical supply routes for their covert operations. So, it's very important to win the hearts and minds of the border population and create trust, build trust between the state and the forces and the local people. So, this is where you talk about our border development schemes, including Border Area Development Program, which is mentioned in the question. The BADP was launched by the Home Ministry under the Border Management Division back in 1986-87. Initially, it was meant only for the Pakistan border. It was implemented in border states like Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, etc., where the border villages received dedicated funds for developmental programs. Later, following the success of BADP, it was expanded to cover all the land borders of India, including the border with China, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And now we have a new scheme which complements the BADP, which is the VVP, Vibrant Villages Program, which was initially launched specifically for border villages facing China. That was phase 1 of Vibrant Villages Program, launched in 2023. But recently, phase 2 has been launched, which covers all the land borders. So there are two complementary development programs implemented in border villages, which applies for Ladakh as well. The Border Area Development Program and Vibrant Villages Program. So these programs are designed to improve the basic amenities like water supply, schools, healthcare facilities, or electricity supply, or installing solar lamps, providing renewable energy to essentially electrify these border areas. Talk about the focus on skill development, job creation to create livelihood opportunities. That is what will win the trust of the local people with better development, better focus on governance, and highlight the role of civic action program implemented by the Indian Army. Civic action refers to security forces playing a developmental role in conflict zones or in sensitive zones. For example, in Naxal areas or in insurgency prone areas like Northeast India, Jammu and Kashmir, the Indian Army or CRPF, right? Whichever is the lead security force, they implement civic action programs. Using their limited resources, they will run few developmental initiatives, maybe free medical camps, free coaching classes, or cultural festivals, sport festivals. So Indian Army implements such civic action program in Ladakh as well, where local medical support has been provided. When disasters take place, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief is carried out by the Indian Army. Search and rescue operations are carried out. Indian Army officials also conduct coaching classes for competitive exams to prepare the youth for opportunities. So these programs, they create a closer bond between the security force deployed in the frontier regions, in conflict zones, and the border population. And that is what will help win the hearts and minds of the local people. So that is the argument you have to present in this particular answer. So it's a very easy question, but it's all about the approach and the kind of points you're going to bring in. Next, question number 19. A very interesting question. It's a good mixture of polity and internal security, focused on Jammu and Kashmir. So Jammu and Kashmir, pre-abrogation of Article 370, and post-abrogation of Article 370. That is the focus of the question. First, the question says separatist movements have been one of the major factors contributing to militancy and instability in J&K. So that is one statement. You can address this in the introduction itself by pointing out that Jammu and Kashmir has faced a serious security threat in the form of militancy, sustained local insurgency and terrorism, and cross-border support from Pakistan for insurgent and terror activities, which has destabilized the region. So it all goes back to 1987-89 period, and you can list out the different factors briefly which have contributed to instability in J&K. You can point out the political alienation of the people of J&K, largely due to administrative and governance neglect, and the rumors of manipulating and rigging the elections of 1987, which created more resentment and strengthened the separatist feelings. The economic backwardness and isolation of the region also being one of the key factors. And more importantly, the cross-border support, state support coming from Pakistan. You need to stress upon the point that Pakistan has essentially cultivated separatist elements, encouraging these elements who had political and economic grievances and directly sponsoring their separatist activities against the Indian state by creating terror camps, safe havens in Pakistan occupied Kashmir or even deep inside Pakistan along the Afghanistan border, and how Pakistan has pumped arms, weapons, funds, and training to push terrorism against India. So bring out 3-4 factors along with the role of the separatist groups. You can even take their names as well. Mention the Hurriyat Conference, the JKLF, for example, Al Badr, and other Pakistan founded groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, and how militancy has been sustained in J&K. Maybe one paragraph, 5-6 sentences, or maybe point-wise to illustrate the instability in J&K. Then, in the body, the question is entirely focusing on the measures taken by the government to bring J&K into national mainstream, and it's asking you to discuss the pre- and post-abrogation status of Article 370 and 35A. So this is where I would ask you to briefly illustrate the provisions of 370 and 35A. How it provided for a separate constitution, how it provided for a separate flag, how it granted greater autonomy to J&K, which was a commitment that had been made when J&K merged with India, when the instrument of accession was signed under difficult circumstances, in order to protect the land, the rights and resources of the people of Kashmir. Based on the demand of Raja Hari Singh, the then Indian government had committed to provide special protection to J&K. And it's nothing new. Similar provisions are seen for Northeast India as well under Article 371A, the series of articles like 371A, B, etc. provide similar special protection to Nagaland, Manipur, etc. So under Article 35A, those who are domiciled in J&K, they enjoyed few special privileges. For example, land was protected. Outsiders, right, migrant workers, for example, they can't purchase land. That was the status under Article 35A prior to 2019, before the special status was abrogated. Even voting rights or reservation in education, in government jobs, and other government benefits, including subsidies and scholarships, they were largely restricted to the local domiciled people of J&K, and it was not available for outsiders. So this was contradictory to fundamental rights granted under Article 19, right? Article 19, which provides for right to free movement, right to take up any profession. In a way, it goes against right to equality as well. It creates a certain distinction. Why? But because of J&K's unique circumstances under which it was forced, in a way, because of Pakistan's activities and its illegal invasion, to sign the instrument of accession to join India. So to protect the land, the culture, and the rights of the people of J&K, some of these special provisions had been provided. Now, how does this reflect after the abrogation of these provisions? Like post and pre, what are the differences? And what the government has done to mainstream J&K into the national agenda? So you can point out that 370 and 35A, they in a way created a distinction between J&K and rest of India, politically, constitutionally. The laws made by the Indian Parliament would not automatically apply to J&K, right? You can present that viewpoint. You can talk about the political constitutional changes pre and post abrogation of 370 and 35A. Previously, there used to be a state government, a state assembly, right? And the parliamentary laws would not automatically apply. They had to be extended by the state assembly. Talk about the elections that used to happen, which was paving the way for the locals to elect their state governments, and how it was seen as a distinct entity, which in a way affected national integration and national unity as well. Right? It's primarily on that basis that the special provisions were abrogated. So, post abrogation, what are the changes? Now it has come under the direct administration of the center. For many years, the promised election for the Union Territory was not held because, see, J&K as a Union Territory, after its reorganization, it's a Union Territory with an assembly, like Puducherry, like Delhi, while Ladakh is a UT under the center's direct administration. J&K remains a Union Territory where center exercises greater degree of control, but it has its own elected assembly. So after a push by the Supreme Court, finally elections were conducted, and now the center enjoys a greater degree of uh, freedom with regard to security, with regard to governance and administration. So you can point out how central assistance, special central assistance has increased, where the center is actively investing in the state, and how land can now be bought by outsiders, which can drive private investments, how it can boost industrial growth, how it can boost tourism as well. Migrant workers are finding more opportunities in Jammu and Kashmir as all these restrictions have now been removed, right? And you can also discuss about local governance, the changes that have taken place, how Panchayati Raj institutions are now more representative and proactive, because there was a time when um, local leaders would be scared to even stand for panchayat elections as they would be threatened by militants. They would even prevent local elections from happening. But today that has changed completely with stronger grassroots governance being witnessed. And talk about infrastructure changes. That's a very important point. A bigger is being given by the center. Talk about the all-weather roads and tunnels like Zojila Tunnel, Zimor Tunnel, and talk about the Chenab railway bridge that was recently inaugurated. How strategic infrastructure is being created, which serves a military purpose and an economic purpose. How connectivity is being improved, right, to bring J&K closer to the rest of India. Then you can even point out that students from J&K are being brought and taken across India on a visit to other states to look at the development happening, to build that harmony, brotherhood, and to make them feel integrated with the rest of the country. So all these measures can be discussed, and you can point out that clearly there has been a positive impact. The number of terror attacks have declined. One important change was post 2019, after the abrogation of 370-35A, terror shifted towards the Jammu region, towards primarily the south of Pir Panjal, in Riyasi district, in Kathua, Poonch. These areas witnessed a sudden spike in terror activities because the security focus was entirely on the Kashmir region. And following this lapse, immediately a course correction was adopted by the security forces and intelligence agencies. Pakistan was exploiting the security weakness in the Jammu sector, but India countered this very effectively, and we have crushed all the militancy and the local terror modules that were operating even in the Jammu region. So security situation in general has improved. Then talk about the border guards initiative, which has been reactivated, under which the center is arming the local communities in the villages and ensuring that they can defend themselves in case of terror attacks against the local communities. So the border guard program being reactivated. So you can talk about the political constitutional changes, economic infrastructure changes, and local governance improvements that have taken place, and eventually the security scenario which has improved. So 5-6 points will basically bring out the positive changes that are being witnessed. Next, question number 20, the last question from security, focused on organized crime. It's focused on counterfeit currencies, fake Indian currency notes, FICNs, its connection with money laundering and other criminal activities and terror funding. It's asking you to talk about the action being taken at the global level to tackle these menace and highlight the role of FATF, Financial Action Task Force, and methods of compliance by its member states in preventing terror funding. So you can start your answer by talking about the interlinkages that exist between organized crime, money laundering, and terror financing. Maybe you can draw a schematic. You can draw a schematic like this to show how terror financing is connected with organized crime and money laundering. money laundering is a process, it's an illegal process through which black money is converted into legal wealth. Now, this black money, this illegal wealth is often generated through criminal activities like drug trafficking, arms trafficking, or corruption, tax evasion. So, generally, when money is moved around and when these complex transactions are carried out to launder the money, it often makes use of Hawala networks. And these Hawala networks often have linkages with terrorist organizations or with hostile intelligence agencies like Pakistan's ISI. And a part of that money can essentially be diverted towards terrorist activities. So it is this ecosystem that Pakistan has cultivated as part of its covert proxy war against India, where Pakistan is actively involved in working with criminal networks which print fake Indian currency notes, counterfeit notes, which are later trafficked and smuggled into India through various routes, through Nepal, through Bangladesh, through sea route as well, to destabilize the Indian economy. Part of the funds are channeled towards terror funding or anti-India activities. Then explain this triangular connection that exists. And that is where you will essentially explain this whole concept. Then talk about the global steps being taken up to fight against terror financing and money laundering. You can talk about the FATF over here, which is the focus of the question. The Financial Action Task Force, give out some facts that it's an intergovernmental body set up by the G7 countries in 1989 to implement anti-money laundering standards. Then, after the 9/11 attacks in 2001, it was given a second objective, which is to implement counter-terror financing standards. So it acts like a global regulatory body, an intergovernmental body, bringing out the global standards to fight money laundering and terror financing. It also builds cooperation between the countries. It implements a mutual evaluation review. It conducts a periodic review to see whether countries are implementing those standards through national legislations. For example, India implements these standards through the PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and by covering counter-terror financing measures under the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which is our primary legislation against terrorism. So India has also set up the required institutional structures. We have a dedicated law enforcement agency, the Enforcement Directorate. We have a dedicated intelligence agency, the Financial Intelligence Unit. Now, India has declared money laundering as a crime, a punishable offense. And once charged with money laundering, there are very stringent provisions under the PMLA, which aligns with the standards of FATF, where even the assets, the proceeds of money laundering can be confiscated by the authorities and attached to the ongoing case. The burden of proof lies on the accused to prove their innocence. Bail becomes almost impossible when you're charged with money laundering and terror financing provisions under the PMLA and the UAPA. So this is how you can explain how countries like India are complying with these FATF standards. Then point out how India keeps a very good check on its financial and banking institutions by implementing KYC norms through digital banking and the DPI infrastructure that we have created, where Aadhaar is connected with your bank account, your phone number, providing for better surveillance and vigilance regarding any suspicious financial transaction happening in the banking and financial industry. Then talk about countries which don't comply, like Pakistan, for example. Pakistan has been repeatedly flagged by the FATF. It has been grey listed 3 times in the past. You can point out that FATF will not only review the performance of a nation, it can even take action against countries which are not cooperating by grey listing them and then giving them a notice, a timeline in which they have to make certain changes to implement an action plan which is prescribed by the FATF. And if they don't comply with this, if they breach that final warning, then those countries can be blacklisted. For example, how Iran, North Korea, Myanmar have been blacklisted. So point out Pakistan's failure to comply with the standards. Draw a clear comparison between India's rigid and strict compliance with global standards and Pakistan flouting these norms, and Pakistan being at the epicenter of enabling money laundering and terror financing. Then you can even mention the No Money for Terror Conference, the NMFT, which was launched in 2018 in Paris. India hosted the third No Money for Terror conference in 2022. In fact, on this, UPSC has already asked a mains question. You can mention this as well, because this is also another global measure to counter money laundering and terror financing. So if you can elaborate on these points, it is more than sufficient. Establish those linkages between organized crime, counterfeit notes, money laundering, and terror financing. That's it. Now, coming to disaster management, the last two questions. From disaster management, we got questions which are static in nature, largely conceptual, but driven by some current developments. Look at this question. It's asking discuss how the contradiction between rapid infrastructure development and disaster risk reduction in ecologically sensitive areas of India can be managed with suitable examples. So there are two important concepts here. You have to bring out the contradiction between rapid infrastructure development versus disaster risk reduction. That is unplanned development, especially in eco-sensitive areas like Himalayas, for example, Andaman Nicobar or Western Ghats, along the coastline of India, or the coastal plains of India. If haphazard ad hoc development, which is not regulated, if it occurs rapidly, if there is large-scale urbanization, if land use planning is not implemented, if buffer zones are not created, and if, let's say, construction picks up with large projects coming up, big human settlements in disaster prone areas, you're essentially increasing the vulnerability and exposure towards a disaster. So you have to explain what is disaster risk reduction. It's a key concept in disaster management. Disaster risk arises when hazard exists with vulnerability and exposure. See, hazards can be natural or man made, right? Hazard is just a potential state which might lead to a disaster in the future. It all depends on vulnerability and exposure of that region. Now, if you take the most seismic zones of India, not only the hazard is present, for example, in the Himalayan belt or in northeast India, but the region is vulnerable because of its geographical factors, socio-economic factors. And if adequate preparedness is not there, if there are no early warning systems, if, let's say, building standards are not followed, if the basic norms are not implemented in disaster risk reduction, the region will have a high exposure as well. That's where the disaster risk increases. So the current focus of disaster governance is on implementing the Sendai framework targets and the principles outlined under the Sendai framework. So, disaster risk reduction is the current mantra of disaster governance, which aligns with sustainable development goals, which is being implemented from 2015 to 2030. So, here you can actually bring out a lot of examples. Maybe you will talk about the sensitive Himalayan belt, right? Give specific examples. Take the GLOF event that occurred recently in Sikkim, where the South Lonak Lake, which is a glacial lake, it burst, triggering a massive flash flood, destroying the Teesta Dam downstream. It's an example of how such projects, hydropower projects, and existence of human settlements in sensitive areas can result in a much bigger disaster where there is greater loss of life, loss of property and infrastructure. You can talk about the Chamoli disaster in Uttarakhand, where a huge rock slip triggered a massive flash flood in the downstream of the rivers present in Uttarakhand, causing a massive disaster where the Tapovan Dam was almost wiped out. Or give the example of Andaman Nicobar and the Great Nicobar project. How rapid construction, which is being proposed under the mega plan to build a new airport, a new transshipment terminal, and a power plant and a industrial cluster, how it could increase the exposure and vulnerability of Andaman Nicobar. It sits right along the margins of Pacific Ring of Fire. It's highly prone to earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis. It's exposed to cyclones as well, right? You can talk about even Western Ghats, specifically Kerala, how over tourism, focus on plantations, right? Destruction of native vegetation, deforestation, and the lack of land use planning has made the Western Ghat region of Kerala more prone to flash floods and deadly floods during the monsoon season. So, 4 or 5 examples should be more than enough, and point out why disaster risk reduction requires a balance with infrastructure development and urbanization. Here, I think you can mention the new earthquake zonation standards that were notified by the BIS, the Bureau of Indian Standards. It triggered a huge outrage and controversy, following which the government withdrew the notification itself. Because, see, the cost of making changes in building design and structure would be too prohibitive because you can't take a stand here against development, right? You can't take one extreme side. You can't say that we should just focus on disaster risk reduction. You can't just say that we will blindly push rapid growth and development. You need to maintain that balance, bring out that contradiction which exists, but your approach should be built on India's National Disaster Management Policy and Plan, which aligns with the Sendai framework and the goals of the Sendai framework. So it calls for better management of these risks, focus on early warning, implementation of building codes, land use planning, and creating some buffer zones in eco-sensitive areas. You can even plug in the eco-sensitive zones which are being considered, which recently the Environment Ministry has notified. Draft proposal has been notified in this regard, right? It's a long-standing issue. Try to plug in these points from environment ecology to point out how there is an inherent contradiction between rapid development and increasing disaster risk. But the only approach, the way forward has to be a balanced approach where you promote growth and development, but at the same time manage the disaster risk. Now, coming to the last question, question number 18, it's focused on the role of the community in disaster management. Analyze this statement with suitable examples from India. Also discuss the challenges to community participation and measures to strengthen it. Now, when you look at India's National Disaster Management Policy and National Disaster Management Plan, the community is considered as one of the key stakeholders in disaster management. This aligns with the Sendai framework. Even the Sendai framework is built on a people-centric approach. That is what you have to illustrate. See, the local people will not just be victims of a disaster. They're not just seen as, bystanders. They are seen as active participants, active stakeholders in disaster governance. Now, in India, we have a three-tiered disaster management framework under the NDMA, SDMA, and the DDMAs. But these institutions, they play a certain limited role, and they can never be effective without the involvement of the local community in disaster planning, disaster preparedness. Because without training the local community to understand early warning alerts, without creating that awareness as to how to respond to a disaster, right? Local community should know what to do, what not to do during times of disasters, be it during evacuation, moving people to a safer place, right? Or responding to the aftermath of a disaster in aiding search and rescue operations of the NDRF and the security forces, in saving lives, in providing much needed support and relief during the disaster response operations, or eventually rebuilding and reconstructing the local region and the infrastructure and economy after the disaster to bring some normalcy back to this affected area. In all the aspects of disaster management, local community plays a critical role. So you can draw the DM cycle, the disaster management cycle, which is built on three important phases: pre-disaster planning and preparedness, then during disaster response, and finally post-disaster reconstruction and recovery and rehabilitation. In all the phases, local community plays a very, very important role. But this requires training, resources, and equipping the local community so that they can handle local disasters on their own and they can coordinate with the district level, state level, and the national level disaster management authorities. So the right examples here would be the incredible framework in Odisha along the coastline, how the local villages, the fishing villages, the coastal communities have been prepared to deal with cyclones and tsunamis. For example, along the coastline, early warning systems have been installed. Immediately when a cyclone is detected, if it is, let's say, supposed to make landfall, the alerts are dispatched immediately and the locals are trained. They are aware as to what to do, that they have to reach out to higher ground. They have to access the cyclone tsunami shelters which are present, and they have to help the other people as well, especially the younger generation or old people or those who are disabled. So regular mock drills are conducted. Look at Odisha's improvement from the 99 super cyclone, where 10,000 plus casualties were reported. And today, a similar intensity cyclone will hardly cause a few deaths, right, in single or double digits. So this is because of heightened awareness amongst local community, better training, equipping them, giving them the right resources. Another example could be Kerala. Kerala also has been doing pretty well. For example, the Kudumbashree program, where women volunteers are rolled in. They are basically involved in spreading better awareness amongst the local communities in landslide prone areas, particularly in Wayanad, or in flash flood and flood prone areas in other parts of Western Ghats. So this has actually yielded good results on the ground. So you can even mention the Apda Mitra scheme of the NDMA, a central scheme under which disaster volunteers are being trained by the NDMA at the grassroots level, who can coordinate with local disaster response authorities and the disaster response forces. So bring out and illustrate these points, and that essentially completes your answer. So on this note, I conclude this analysis of questions from internal security and disaster management. But don't go anywhere, just wait for a few seconds. Hima ma'am will be joining soon to discuss all the science and tech questions. And if you like the session, do let us know in the comments. And what is your take on these questions? Do you find it easy or difficult? Please drop in your comments below. So just wait for a few seconds. Hima ma'am will join soon.
Good evening friends, welcome to Unacademy. First of all, I am very happy to say that like last year, this year also 4 questions came from science and technology. The questions number 5, 6, 15 and 16, and once again all the 4 questions are from our courses and the notes. Let us quickly continue to discuss these questions and have a model answer. The very first question is, explain by giving 2 examples how the biotechnology has helped the Indian farmers in processing their perishable crops. Okay, and this particular topic is about antisense RNA technology. This is a screenshot from our course, the comprehensive course on science and technology. In this we discussed how antisense RNA technology can help in managing the perishable crops like tomatoes, mangoes, etc. So let us see what is the technology. Let us see the mechanism of action of this antisense RNA technology. There is one gene called as here controlling the ripening of the ripening hormones or delaying the softening. There is one type of tomato, a genetically modified version. We can't say it is genetically modified, but why? Because genetically modified crop means a foreign gene is to be added. In this flower sour tomato, we are not adding any foreign gene. An existing gene is being silenced. So we are using a mechanism called as gene silencing. Which gene we are silencing? There is one enzyme called as polygalacturonase enzyme. Okay, polygalacturase enzyme producing gene. This gene produces an enzyme called as polygalacturonase enzyme. But before that, we know that a gene will first become an RNA by a process called as transcription. So it will produce polygalacturonase RNA. Which RNA? Polygalacturonase mRNA. Then let us imagine polygalacturonase mRNA is like this, AUGUACU. I am writing a random sequence. Then what we introduce here is a different RNA we introduce here. Like for example, its complementary sequence, A for U, U for A, G for C, U for A for U, C for G and U for A. If the yellow color one is the mRNA, this green color RNA which I have drawn here is called as antisense RNA. Why this is called antisense RNA? Because its sequence is exactly opposite to the sequence of the mRNA. Okay, like if a cap binds to a pen, then the pen cannot write. So just like that, this antisense RNA will bind to the mRNA like a cap, and it will block the mRNA and it will prevent the mRNA getting translated. The next step is translation. Through translation, it should become a polygalacturonase enzyme. Polygalacturonase enzyme, which is nothing but a protein. But what we are doing, this translation process will be blocked because we are binding an antisense RNA to the mRNA as if we are putting a cap onto the mRNA. I repeat, there is one enzyme called polygalacturonase, and this particular enzyme is produced by the polygalacturonase gene. By transcription, it will become polygalacturonase mRNA. To that we add antisense RNA. It means artificially we add one RNA which can bind to that mRNA like a cap. Means it is physically closing the mRNA, not letting the mRNA to produce the polygalacturonase enzyme. And what this enzyme is doing, it will make the fruits soft. So if this enzyme is not produced, then the fruits will not become soft. Okay, it means even after ripening, these tomatoes and mangoes stay firm and strong. They're as hard as the raw mangoes and raw tomatoes. So because of this, what happens? The transport becomes easy and the shelf life increases. So using biotechnology, we are managing the perishable crops. Okay, the other process is controlling the ripening hormones. What is ripening hormone? Since school days, you all know that ethylene is the ripening hormone. We have two enzymes that produce ethylene hormone. What are they? ACC synthase enzyme and ACC oxidase enzyme. Two enzymes called ACC synthase and ACC oxidase. They produce ethylene. So using the same antisense RNA technology, what we are doing is using antisense RNA. We block the production of ACC synthase and ACC oxidase. Okay, these two enzymes produce ethylene hormone, the fruit ripening hormone. But we are blocking these enzymes. These enzymes are not there. So ethylene hormone will not be produced, or we control the production of ethylene hormone. I mean, we don't completely block it. For example, if you have 100 copies of these mRNA, only 50 copies we block. So we minimize the production of ethylene hormone. Because of this, what happens? The ripening process will become slow. Because of that, what happens? The shelf life increases. This increases the shelf life. I repeat, there are two enzymes called ACC synthase and ACC oxidase. The names are here: ACC synthase, ACC oxidase. What they do? They produce ethylene. Ethylene is a fruit ripening hormone. Using antisense RNA technology, what we are doing? We are blocking the production of these two enzymes. So these two enzymes are not there. So they will not produce the ethylene hormone. So fruit ripening hormone production is minimized. Because of this, the ripening process will become slow. If the ripening process is slow, the shelf life of the fruits increases. Okay. Then in the question they have asked us to give two examples, but we have given a third example also here, that is another enzyme called as polyphenol oxidase enzyme. Okay, we block the production of this enzyme also. What this enzyme will do? This is responsible for bruising of the potatoes. It means because of these enzymes, the potatoes will become bruised. I repeat, polyphenol oxidase enzyme. Polyphenol oxidase enzyme. What it will do? It is responsible for bruised potatoes. Okay, I repeat, polyphenol oxidase enzyme. What it will do? It is responsible for bruising of the potatoes. So what we are doing? Using the same antisense RNA technology, we block the production of this polyphenol oxidase. So the potatoes will not be bruised. So what happens? Shelf life increases. So these are the three examples where we used biotechnology, okay, to increase the shelf life of the perishable crops, okay. And this particular topic we discussed in our comprehensive course. This is a screenshot from our live class, tomatoes, mangoes, gene that makes the fruit soft using antisense RNA technology. And here I have also given the antisense RNA technology mechanism of action. So this is our fifth question from Science and Technology. I hope it is clear. Okay, you are able to hear me? Right. Then moving on to the next question. The next question is, distinguish between fast breeder reactor and the thermonuclear reactor. Fast breeder reactor. Please let me know. Am I audible? Yes? Okay. Thank you. Right. So moving on to the sixth question. Distinguish between fast breeder reactor and the thermonuclear reactor in the context of first indigenously developed prototype fast breeder reactor at Kalpakam and explain the concept of criticality. Okay. So did we discuss this particular echo effect is there? So, okay. Right. Fine. Let us continue with the topic. So this is a question about fast breeder reactor, criticality, etc. So firstly, did we discuss this in our courses? Yes. This particular, it's a screenshot from our live class, fast breeder reactor, okay, at Kalpakam, Bhavini at Kalpakam. And here I even mentioned about criticality in the nuclear reactors. What is criticality, subcritical, critical, supercritical, all these points are as it is covered. Okay, right. Now let us see. Firstly, what is the difference between fast breeder reactor and the thermonuclear reactor? It is better, okay, to write the differences in the form of a table. Okay, thermonuclear reactor and the fast breeder reactor. In the normal thermonuclear reactor, okay, the neutrons are slow neutrons or thermal neutrons. Whereas in the fast breeder reactor, we use fast neutrons. If you check the word fast breeder reactor, in this the word fast stands for fast neutrons. The term breeder refers to it breeds. Breeds means what? It produces fissile material from the fertile material. Like for example, uranium 238 will get converted into plutonium 239, or thorium 232 will become uranium 233. These are fertile material, okay, and these are fissile material. In the term fast breeder reactor, the term fast represents fast neutron, and the term breeder because it breeds or it produces the fissile material from the fertile material. So basically that is the meaning of a fast breeder reactor. So the fast breeder reactor Just 1 second, let me check the audio. You're able to hear me? Yes, you're able to hear me? Is my audio okay? Audible now? Right. So we are discussing the question on the fast breeder reactor. In the word fast breeder reactor, the term fast represents a fast neutron. The term fast represents fast neutron, and breeder represents because it is breeding or it is producing fissile material from the fertile material. Fertile material example uranium-238 and thorium-232, and when a fast neutron binds to it, the fertile material will become the fissile material. Like uranium-238 will get converted into plutonium-239 and the thorium-232 will get converted into uranium-233. So basically this is a fast breeder reactor. The question is asking us to distinguish between a fast breeder reactor and a thermal reactor. Let us write the differences in the form of a table. So this will be a value addition. Okay. So if you check, the thermal reactor uses slow neutrons, whereas the fast breeder reactor uses fast neutrons. Do we need a moderator? Moderator is used to slow down the neutrons. Moderator is used to slow down the neutrons. Should we slow down the neutrons in the fast breeder reactor? No, we need fast neutrons. So that is the reason why here no need of a moderator, because you need not slow down the neutrons. Here you need a moderator like water or heavy water or graphite, because here we have to slow down the neutron. And coolant, okay, to cool down the system, here we use either water or heavy water. But in the fast breeder reactor, we do not use heavy water. We use liquid sodium as a coolant, because if we use water as the coolant, okay, it can slow down the neutrons. If we use water as a coolant, it can slow down the neutrons. So that is the one. Then fuel. What is the fuel used? Fuel is mainly uranium-235. That is, we use the fissile material. Whereas in the fast breeder reactor, we use uranium-235, plutonium-239, uranium-233, that is fissile material in the core, and we also use uranium-238 and thorium-232 in the breeder blanket. How this breeder blanket concept works? So imagine this is our breeder blanket. Breeder blanket. In the breeder blanket we use uranium-238. Okay. In the core we use plutonium-239. In the core we use uranium-235. Uranium-235. Okay. When uranium-235 undergo fission, it will produce barium plus krypton plus 3 fast neutrons. Now these fast neutrons will bind to the breeder blanket. In the breeder blanket you have uranium-238, the uranium-238 will become plutonium-239. Plutonium-239. So this is how we use fissile material and also the fertile material in the fast breeder reactor. Next, breeding. Generally, okay, no breeding. It means a thermal reactor do not produce fissile material from the fertile material. Whereas fast breeder reactor is breeding the fissile material from the fertile material. And the role in India. In India, fast breeder reactor is very important. Okay, because in India we have uranium scarcity. Do we really have uranium scarcity? Don't we have sufficient uranium in the country? No, we have good amount of uranium resources in the country, but the problem is they are low grade uranium. Because they are low grade uranium, we need to spend a lot in processing that. So importing uranium is becoming cheaper than extracting our own uranium. So that is the reason why we have to depend on thorium-232. In India, we have 25% of the global thorium resources. Okay, but the problem is thorium is fertile material. We have to convert the fertile material into fissile material. So therefore, we definitely need a fast breeder reactor for the India's 3-stage nuclear program. Is it clear? So we have uranium scarcity, but you have enough amount of thorium, 25% of the global resources, but there is a limitation. Thorium is a fertile material, it cannot directly undergo fission. Okay, so we have to convert it into a fissile material which can undergo fission. That is, we have to convert thorium-232 into uranium-233. Okay, this is fissile. It means it can undergo fission. Okay, so for that conversion we need fast breeder reactor. Okay, so that is the reason why it is very significant for the country. Now let us see what is criticality. Okay, criticality is, okay, I told you already, at the core we are taking a fissile material like uranium-235 and it is undergoing fission and it produces barium, krypton and 3 fast neutrons. So here fast neutrons are produced. Fast neutrons are produced. How they are produced? Produced from the fission. Produced from the fission. Also, fast neutrons are produced in the fission and also they are absorbed. Fast neutrons are also absorbed by the reactor itself. The reactor itself will also absorb the neutrons. So the point is, okay, the neutrons produced, the fast neutrons produced should be equal to the fast neutrons that are absorbed. That condition is called criticality. The number of fast neutrons which are produced is equal to the fast neutrons which are absorbed by the surrounding material. That is called criticality. This is compulsory for the reaction to continue. And the news is the prototype, that is a model fast breeder reactor called Kalpakam, achieved the criticality. So that is important. Then what is subcriticality? Subcriticality is if the fast neutrons produced are lesser than the fast neutrons absorbed, then it is called subcriticality. If the fast neutrons produced are more than the fast neutrons which are absorbed, then it is called supercritical. Our prototype fast breeder reactor called Kalpakam achieved the criticality. Okay, so this particular topic as it is, we discussed this critical, subcritical, okay, supercritical, Kalpakam achieving criticality, fast breeder reactor. All these points we discussed in our live classes. And these are the value additions. This is the diagram for thermal reactor. What is this? This is thermal reactor. Okay, and what is this one? This is fast breeder reactor. Okay, and this is our India's 3-stage nuclear program. Should you draw all the 3 diagrams in the exam? No, you will not have sufficient place. So don't draw this. This is only for your reference. Draw this because the question is about the fast breeder reactor, and you don't have to draw this because we don't have enough space. Okay, with one diagram of fast breeder reactor, with a table that compares the fast breeder reactor with thermal reactor, you can write a very scoring answer for this particular question. Okay, right. Then after that, here I have given implications for India's clean energy future. First one is better utilization of the uranium, because if you take the natural uranium is 99.3% uranium-238. Only 0.7% is uranium-235, which is fissile. Okay, so if you do not have a fast breeder reactor, this uranium-238, all these things will get wasted. Whereas fast breeder reactor can convert this uranium-238 into plutonium-239, and we have a lot of thorium-232 that can be converted. Fast breeder reactor can convert this into uranium-233. Okay, so if fast breeder reactor is not there, 99.3% of the uranium we have will get wasted. So therefore better utilization of the uranium. Next, utilization of the thorium by converting this into uranium-233. Low carbon electricity. This either thermal reactor or the fast breeder reactor do not release any carbon waste. So zero carbon footprint. So that is the reason why low carbon electricity can be generated. Energy security, because these days we are depending a lot on the other countries for the fossil fuels import, and particularly due to the geopolitical disturbances, the supply chain may get disrupted. So if we depend on the nuclear reactors, especially if we depend on fast breeder reactor, it means we can use our own thorium. As I already told you, 25% of the global thorium resources are in India. So if you can finally depend on the thorium, then we need not depend on the other countries, either for the import of fossil fuels or for the import of uranium. So that is the reason why energy security purpose we need this. And the technology self-reliance. I mean, if we make a fast breeder reactor, we are self-reliant technically and also based on the resources. So these are the implications of India's fast breeder reactor, and add a conclusion to it. Okay, am I audible? Is everything clear? We completed 2 questions. We are moving on to the 3rd question, that is the question number 15. Right? Just respond once. Is everything fine? So once again, like last year, this year also we got 4 questions, and the questions are numbered 5, 6, 15 and 16. Same numbers are being maintained almost every year. Okay, and like the last year, like most of the years, this year also all the 4 questions are from our notes and the courses. Okay, see the 3rd one. Mention salient features of Mission Drishti. Did we discuss Mission Drishti? Yes. We discussed Mission Drishti in our UCAN sessions, the Unacademy Current Affairs Navigator. So this is a screenshot from the live class. Okay. So Mission Drishti, what is its speciality? Sync fused synthetic aperture radar. As it is, the question is asking, okay, why it is considered as the world's first satellite of its kind? It is considered the world's first satellite of its kind because of its sync fused technology. Because we use synthetic aperture radar plus multispectral cameras. It is the world's first satellite which is using both the technologies together. Along with that point, it means it's not even, okay, it is not even like I mentioned about Drishti somewhere, as it is every part of the question is there in this. What makes it a special satellite is also covered here. Okay, now, so after some introduction, let us continue with that. What is this Mission Drishti? Launch, salient features of Mission Drishti. We should address every word in the question. First thing is salient features of Mission Drishti. So let us take that particular thing as our first subheading, launch. It is launched in the rocket called Falcon 9 rocket by SpaceX company, okay, from California. Orbit, okay, this particular Mission Drishti is in the sun synchronous low earth orbit at approximately 500 kilometer altitude. Resolution approximately 1.2 to 3.6 meters. Okay, revisit around 4 days. Okay, and it is also having applications in agriculture, disaster management, maritime monitoring, all these things. Is it clear? Right? Indian satellite but launched in SpaceX company's Falcon 9 Mission Drishti, right? Okay, then so now let us see what is the speciality of this. Okay, why this is world's first satellite of this kind. Okay, what makes this satellite so special? Let us try to address that aspect. Okay, first one, multispectral electro-optical imaging. Okay, this is just about, it captures the reflected sunlight, means, okay, this is based on the visible light. This is based on the visible light. Okay, and it produces clear photo-like images. This is just like a camera. This is just like a camera, right? Okay, so the multispectral electro-optical imaging is just like one camera. Okay, what it will do? It will produce clear photo-like images. We just get a photo like a color photo. Okay, and you can capture the photos of vegetation, land usage. I mean the land is used for construction or agriculture or for mining. Is it a cropland, land usage, infrastructure? These photos you can take. What is the limitation? It is affected by clouds. Obviously, visible light, okay, clouds can block the visible light. So therefore, and also visible light during dark, it cannot take the photographs. Okay, what are the limitations of this multispectral optical imaging? That is, this cameras that use visible light. What is the limitation? It is affected by clouds, because visible light cannot pass through the clouds, cannot pass through the haze, and in the dark it cannot take the photographs. But what is the advantage of this camera type sensor? It can take a color photo like image, clear image of vegetation, land, infrastructure, etc. So the first one is optical imaging. It uses visible light. Advantages is clear color photo like images. We can take the photographs of vegetation, land usage and infrastructure. But the limitation is, just like your camera, it also cannot take the photographs of the vegetation, land usage and infrastructure when the weather is cloudy, or when you have haze, or during the darkness, during the night time. So these are the advantages and limitations. Now moving on to the next one, that is synthetic aperture radar. Okay, firstly, how a radar works. A radar will emit the radio waves or microwaves. Step 1, radar will emit the radio waves. Then step 2, they hit one surface. Okay, Step 3, the surface will reflect. The surface will reflect the radio waves. Step 4, okay, the radar will analyze. The radar analyze the reflected radio waves. Okay, and fifth step, by analyzing the reflected radio waves, it will understand the nature of the surface. Understand the nature of the surface means, is it a grassland or a forest? Okay, grassland or a forest, or snow covered, or is it an ocean, or is it a building? Okay, like that it will understand the nature of the surface. I repeat, radar will emit the radio waves, they will hit the surface will reflect the radio waves, radar will analyze the reflected back radio waves and then understand the nature of the surface. This is how a radar works. Okay, then what is a synthetic aperture radar? It is a radar which is tied to, a spacecraft, or an aircraft. Okay, if you tie a radar to a spacecraft or an aircraft, then it is called as a synthetic aperture radar. So the second type of the sensor here is the synthetic aperture radar. It will send the microwave signals towards the earth and analyze the returned signals, which are returned. And it works, advantage is it works day and night. The limitation in the optical sensor is the advantage in the synthetic aperture radar. This optical sensor cannot take the pictures during the dark, whereas synthetic aperture radar can also take the pictures in the night and can also penetrate the clouds and rain. So that is the advantage. But what is the disadvantage? Okay, the pictures that we get are not as clear as the optical imaging. We don't get a color photo like images. These images must be further interpreted. A technician should study that image and interpret the meaning of that. They are not like, because you can't see the radio waves. So the image generated by synthetic aperture radar is not like a photograph. A technician should interpret that particular image again. Okay, right? So that is how the mission drishti works. And moving on to the last question. Okay, so why it is considered, why mission drishti, sorry, we still did not start the last question. Why mission drishti is considered the world's first satellite of its kind? Because it is the world's first satellite that use sync fused. Sync fused means what? Synchronized. We are fusing two different technologies. Usually we have several satellites having synthetic aperture radar. For example, our NISAR mission is also using synthetic aperture radar. And there are several satellites which use optical, that is camera-like sensors. But here the advantage is it is sync fused. It is fusing both the technologies. That is, it synchronizes and fuses the data from distinct types of sensors like synthetic aperture radars and the optical cameras. This is the world's first satellite of this kind. That is the speciality, and add some conclusion to it. Okay. Now moving on to the last question. Okay, we got total 4 questions and this is the last question. What is agentic artificial intelligence? Agentic AI. Explain how it works. Describe its applications, advantages, okay, like challenges and risks. So question is, what is agentic AI? How it works? What are its applications? Okay, what are the advantages, disadvantages, risks? So let us analyze all the aspects of it. Okay, firstly, what is agentic AI? It refers to an artificial intelligence system that can autonomously perceive, plan, make decision, take action, and finally achieve the goal without much human interpretation. Okay, in the step 1, what we do is goal. Who gives the goal? The person gives the goal, or the organization gives the goal. Person or organization gives the goal. Okay. What is the second step? It perceives. Okay. Perception means it will understand what to do. It will understand what to do. Okay. Means, for example, it will collect the data from the sensors, websites, databases to understand what to do. Then it will plan the action. Okay, I understood what is the problem, how to solve this, how to perform this action, plan the action, breaks the goal into smaller tasks, finally executes. It executes that plan. Okay, how it executes? For that it uses tools, APIs, different softwares, etc. Okay, using different softwares, application programming interfaces, using several software tools, okay, it will execute that particular action. Okay, and then it will also learn from the feedback. Okay, means it performed the action, but the action is not up to the mark, and it can also do corrections from that, learn from the feedback. Okay, and okay, it will adapt, learn and adapt. Now, do you need human interruption in this? No need. Okay, human oversight is not needed. It is like your digital colleague. Okay, agentic AI is like your digital colleague. It can do everything that a software engineer can do. Okay, human oversight is needed only to approve the high risk task. It means the task that you have given is a high risk task. Then you need human intervention in this. Okay, to check if everything is right or not. Okay, if it is a normal, regular, daily task, then without the intervention of human beings, it can independently perform the task. It is not like ChatGPT, which will just give you some answers. It will just work like a human colleague, a digital software engineer. Okay, so that is nothing but agentic AI. And did I discuss this in our classroom programs? Yes, this is from the mains crash course for 2026 mains crash course. In that, this is one of the topics that we have given, and this is a screenshot from our live classes. Okay, so agentic AI tools. Okay, did I mention only agentic AI tools? Okay, no, we have also discussed its applications, examples are given. Okay, now let us continue with the model answer. And here, what are the applications? Second part of the question is, what are the applications? In the health sector, it can analyze the patient data and assist in the diagnosis. In the finance, it can detect suspicious transactions. For example, if any fraud is happening, it can detect that. It creates personalized learning plan. Okay, like you can ask it to make a study plan. Okay, then cyber security, it detect and respond to the cyber threats. Automatically it will detect, not only detect and inform you, it will also take an action to prevent that. Okay, to manage robots, etc. Governance, it automates application processing. For example, you apply for a government job or for a degree course, it can process the application forms of the students. Okay, then software, it can generate new softwares. Like a software engineer, it can write a new software. Agentic AI can even write a new software. Okay, it can even generate new softwares. Fine, very good. Now they did not ask examples, but definitely examples are value addition. In the exam, any topic that comes, we must give the example. So ChatGPT agent by OpenAI, not regular ChatGPT. ChatGPT agent by OpenAI. Gemini computer use in Gemini 3.5 Flash by Google. Cloud computer use by the company Anthropic. And this is one very interesting example. Synthetic research agents are there. In the year 2020, in this year, agentic AI systems like OpenAI's Codex and Claude autonomously conducted parts of gravitational wave and particle physics. In space technology, we studied about gravitational waves. Albert Einstein predicted them 100 years ago, and we detected the gravitational waves LIGO, LISA. Okay, that gravitational wave data, okay, this particular agentic AI analyzed independently. Means like human beings, it is analyzing the complex data from the gravitational wave and particle physics experiments. Is that clear? And it can also generate reports with minimal human intervention, without any human involvement. I repeat the last paragraph. OpenAI's Codex and Claude. Codex and Claude. What they have done? They analyzed the data from gravitational wave observatories like LIGO. From the LIGO observatory, it analyzed the data. And particle physics means like Large Hadron Collider. They analyzed the data from LIGO observatory, Large Hadron Collider, and independently generated the reports without the human intervention. A very important example. Okay. Then what are the risks associated? This is the headline of a Hindu newspaper article, that is Saspocalypse. Okay, if you remember this particular word, okay, like it became a big buzz somewhere around in the month of May or so. Okay, what happens here? If the agentic AI performs all these tasks, you don't have to take subscription from so many SaaS companies. Okay, I would have taken a subscription from 6 SaaS companies, but one agentic AI tool will do all those tasks from me. So I will stop purchasing those subscriptions. Then what happens? SaaS companies, software as a service companies, may collapse. Okay, it is a word that is to imitate the apocalypse, like an apocalypse. SaaS companies will face an apocalypse, that is called SaaSpocalypse. That is a risk associated. Okay, and what are the challenges? Loss of human control, privacy and cyber security issues, unclear legal accountability. It means if it does some wrong action, who is legally accountable, whom to punish? Okay, then job displacement, the SaaSpocalypse. Okay, if the SaaS companies face an apocalyptic loss, then what happens? They cannot take employees, so it will displace the human employees. So job displacement. Advantages: automation of the complex task. For example, like I told you, gravitational wave observatories like LIGO. Okay, LIGO and Large Hadron Colliders generate enormous amount of data. Analyzing this much amount of data may not be possible for the human beings. So automation of the complex tasks, higher productivity and efficiency, faster decision making, personalized customized services. These are the applications of agentic AI. Okay, so these are the 4 questions, and all the 4 questions are from our comprehensive courses or the current affairs classes and covered in our notes, along with the details given in the question. Even the sub parts of the questions are covered. Okay, so that's all for this year mains analysis of the GS paper 3. Thank you so much.